There's finally some good news for small businesses. We all know the challenges small businesses have faced during the COVID pandemic. Now, through DC HealthLink, small businesses can offer their employees quality, affordable health insurance. There's no better way to attract and keep employees, and DC HealthLink makes it easy. 0% down on health plan premiums. Auto pay, a secure way to make payments on time. Plan Choice gives employees multiple plan options and allows employers to compete with large companies. And administrative ease. One monthly bill, one payment. DC HealthLink offers big benefits for small businesses. Enrollment is easy and year-round. Visit dchealthlink.com for more information or contact your broker. Don't delay, enroll today. DC HealthLink, a healthy investment for your employees and your business.
Well, good morning again. I just want to make sure that Councilmember Grace knows that I heard loud and clear the challenge that he put on the DC Chamber and we're ready to take on. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful panel. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the State of Education and Workforce Development panel. This is a very, as well, dear to my heart panel since I grew up amongst educators and has been part of my life. So I understand firsthand how important it is to grow a workforce development that is going to help in the future and to really help our communities go to a much, much better place. So thank you so much for investing your time this morning. Our moderator today is Paul Ken, Deputy Mayor for Education for the District of Columbia. Deputy Mayor Ken was appointed by Mayor Bowser to serve in his role in 2018. He previously served for 3 years as the Deputy Superintendent of the School District of Philadelphia. As the Superintendent's second in command, he helped lead the system through a significant transformation, including improvements in teacher and principal hiring and development, a transition to Common Core standards, the promotion of evidence-based innovations in schools and classrooms, a wholesale revision of charter authorizing policies and procedures, and smarter allocation of diminishing resources. Joining Deputy Mayor Ken today on our panel, we have Dr. Ron Mason, President of the University of the District of Columbia, Dr. Michelle Walker Davis, Executive Director of the DC Public Charter School Board, Dr. Louis Farabee, Chancellor from DC Public Schools, and Dr. Sylvia Burwell, President of American University. Thank you so much for joining us today. As president of the organization, I'm extremely grateful, and the contributions of the education sector are key for the success of the business community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. My name is Paul Kine. As Angela said, I'm the Deputy Mayor for Education, and it really is a pleasure and an honor to be here moderating this discussion with my distinguished colleagues as we dive into the current state of affairs in our education and workforce development systems. I want to begin our conversation today by trying to provide a little bit of the shape of our current state across the education system and the education cluster. I'm going to invite each of you just to reflect briefly on your current priorities as we together come out of the pandemic and try to get back to some kind of normalcy. So I'm going to begin with you, President Mason, and ask you just to share with us what are your current top 1 or 2 priorities as you are navigating the recovery. And you are muted, sir.
Good morning. Thank you, Paul, for starting with me, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. So where are we today? We have multiple priorities, as you know better than anyone, but we're recovering from enrollment loss. We're not back where we were before the pandemic, but that's a big priority. Related to that is learning loss. You know, our students generally are older than students coming right out of high school. And so they've, in a lot of ways, forgotten how to be students. And so we're re-entering them into the learning process. And then, since this is partially about workforce in the chamber, you know, we've been working with the district to establish these workforce pipelines, our priorities, healthcare, technology, and teacher training. And so because of investments from the district, we've been able to move those things forward as well. And I would say if I had a top three, in addition to just the health and navigating a pandemic, which may or may not still be a pandemic, I would say those are our priorities.
Thanks, Ron. And let me just follow up with you briefly and ask, what's the thing you're most concerned about? What's keeping you up at night currently that you're still working on?
I think it is the learning loss because you know, we were able to transition to a remote emergency delivery because we were prepared, we had the technology, our faculty was trained, but a lot of the students that were had many challenges even before the pandemic, especially through our community college. We lost them in transition from high school to college. And so getting them back in the learning mode, getting them back on campus, back into class, and back on track from a learning perspective, I think is something that it keeps me up at night a little bit, not only for the university and the students, but for the district as a whole.
Thank you, President Mason. President Burwell, let's stick with our higher education partners here, and let me ask you to reflect a little bit in the areas where you have similar priorities to President Mason, or maybe some different ones. What are your current top priorities in recovery?
Paul, thank you, and thanks for me being here today with my colleagues. Pleased to be able to be here with you all. As I think about the priorities coming out of the recovery, I kind of go back to, we had three core principles that guided our work throughout the recovery. Number one was the health and safety of the American university community. Number two was, how do we maintain momentum against our core mission of learning and scholarship and community, which are key elements of our strategy during the pandemic. And number three was, what role do we as a university play in the broader health of our community, the district? And so those three things, as we're coming out of COVID, are still quite important to us. And so maintaining that momentum of our strategy, and as part of that strategy is our connection with the community that we are in. We like to say we are both in and of the community. And whether that's the work that we're doing with DC in terms of education, and we're pleased to be able to work with the Chancellor on a number of fronts, including the DCPS teacher pipeline, which is a priority of American University, trying to use our School of Education to make sure students from the district come to AU. We've committed an additional $3 million in scholarships for students in the district to come to AU, get that degree in education, and go back and teach in the district. And so that our engagement with the district as part of our core strategy would be one of our big priorities that we continue to focus on and build on that momentum as we're coming out of this pandemic.
Thanks, President Burwell. It's clear to me that you're engaged in lots of work and lots of recovery work. I want to ask you the same question I asked President Mason, which is, what's the thing that's hardest? Meaning, we've all been struggling through these few years, but what is the thing that's really keeping you up at night you may not have a solution to yet?
So one of the things, and there are a couple of things, I'm sure President Mason would agree, there are a number of things when you're a university president that keep you up at night. But one of the things that keeps me up at night is actually well-being. And that's the well-being of our students, our staff, our faculty, and the mental health issues that affect our campus. We are a microcosm of the community. We're a microcosm of the nation and the world. And these issues, I think there were problems and challenges before the pandemic, but these are things that have been accelerated during the pandemic. So how we as a university contribute directly to our community members, we contribute in terms of the scholarship and research work creating in the space, how we contribute in terms of creating leaders for tomorrow. Working across all those things are things that keep me up, because I believe that the challenge is acute, and I'm not sure that we as a nation and our communities have fully come to grasp. It kind of connects back to the health panel that was before us in terms of these health issues.
Thank you, and I'm glad to have someone of your expertise and experience, President Burwell, focused on those issues. I think they are likely shared with some of our K-12 colleagues, so let me turn now to Dr. Michelle Walker-Davis, Executive Director of the Public Charter School Board. And Michelle, I know you don't directly run schools. You are proudly the authorizer of the charter schools and the charter sector, and a close and astute observer of what's happening in the charter side of the K-12 system. So I'd like to ask you, as you thought about your work and your supportive work, what are your priorities in the pandemic? Does anything President Burwell or President Mason say resonate with you? And then I'll come to you also on your biggest concern.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. So as you well know, I started in my role in the midst of the pandemic and really jumped right in and faced the reality that many of us knew for some time, but were reminded of, that schools are more than just places to learn. They are, in fact, the centers of our community. And so I really appreciate your support and my colleague at DCPS and also our state superintendent and the ways in which we rally together to support our schools. Also, at the beginning of my tenure, I embarked on the ambitious journey of implementing a strategic plan. And that is our key priority, our North Star here at the Public Charter School Board. So our roadmap, as we call it, is really guided by the impact on students, on our school leadership and our families. And some of the activities that we're focused on within the strategic roadmap is shifting our accountability framework to primarily focus on academic outcomes and school climate, certainly in response to what we've learned in the pandemic, but also to really focus on our historically marginalized youth and make sure that we are preparing them for success. And as you well know, another area that we've been focused on is our charter expansion and growth. And so we revised our charter application process to really improve the quality of the applications we receive, to ensure that they're strong, and most importantly, that they're responsive to the needs of our community and the demands for our families. So those are the things that we've been focused on. One, how do we ensure the best quality of the schools that we have? And two, how do we ensure that anyone interested in expanding or coming to the District of Columbia to provide education is in alignment with what we want to see, both prior to the pandemic, but certainly in response to the pandemic, that we are really supporting our students and families with recovery.
Thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. And just quickly, your biggest concern currently through all that work that you're focused on, the progressive work, what's your concern?
Absolutely. So there are three main areas that stay top of mind for me. One of them is staffing. So recruiting and retaining qualified teachers and staff. How do I, from the position of an authorizer, support that work? How do we collectively make the District of Columbia the most attractive place for teachers to want to be and stay? Academics, and that definitely resonates with what I've heard from our university presidents, to make sure that students are receiving high quality education every day. And then, as you and I have discussed and our other education leaders, school safety, just ensuring that our students are getting to and from school safely, and that when they are there, they are experiencing safe and nurturing environments. So those would be my three.
Thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. Clearly very, very crucial. Chancellor Farabee, we'll come to you now. We've heard some themes here already, learning acceleration and learning loss as being priorities, the focus on mental health, and some other themes. I'd love to hear from you how this matches with your own priorities in recovery and your own concerns.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Again, it's good to be with my colleagues. I think it's important for the audience to know that DCPS and the public charter schools in the city are more connected to our higher ed institutions than we've ever been. And I think that's critical as we think about preparing our students for college and career. But what has been said before certainly resonates. I go back to what was said about just the well-being. I think important for us is ensuring that we recognize the trauma that both adults and young people have experienced, and understanding that the greatest gift in this process of acceleration will be time, ensuring that we, give ourselves the appropriate time, but also ensuring that there's important strategies. So for us, one of our strategies is to just meet students where they are, whether that be academically, socially, emotionally, and ensuring that we have both the structures, the monitoring, and also the appropriate interventions to meet students where we are. We proudly invested a lot in small group and one-on-one instruction. Last year and over the summer, we served over 18,000 students in that format, which was huge for us. And so we continue to think about ways in which we can provide that level of service. We know the intensity of instruction will vary and the need will vary by student. Secondly, we are focused now on early literacy skills. We know that when students were not with us in person, especially our earliest learners, they struggled a lot in early literacy skills. So we have leaned into the science of reading and the convergent research on brain development and how that relates to acquiring those critical skills. Secondly, we've also invested in new curriculum in mathematics. We saw that our older students specifically struggled with mathematics when they were not with us in person. So we wanted to ensure that we can cover ground there. And then finally, we continue to have an eye towards post-secondary success. During the pandemic, we started what we call DCPS Persist, which is our support to our alumni, which includes financial support, coaching, mentoring, to ensure that our students that are in higher ed institutions are able to persist and graduate in a timely fashion.
Thanks, Chancellor. Across all this work, let me ask you the question I've asked everyone. What's the big unresolved concern that you currently have?
Yeah, I just think the ability to have a reasonable pace. I think there's a natural desire to want to catch up quickly, and we should have that desire. But I want to be sure that we care for our people, our students, and our staff in that process, and recognize the trauma in the moment.
Thank you. I think such an important reminder that we are together on a journey rather than a sprint. Let me ask now the panel at large a related question to what we've just been talking about before I come back to this question that you've raised about deep collaboration. But I'm interested in all of your recovery work, and as we come out of the pandemic, as you think about your priorities and some of the challenges, I'm interested to know from one or more of you if you believe the fundamental nature of your work has changed in any way. Are we simply trying to get back to the way things were in 2019? Or do you believe there have been some fundamental transformational shifts in how you go about your business? Does anyone have a response to that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to jump in. So certainly things have changed. I don't think we will ever go back to where we've been before. And so I always tell our team, if you're looking for things to be where they were, stop looking, because we're in a space, and that space will continue to evolve. But I think what's evolved for us is our ability to connect with families with technology and other resources in ways that we didn't in the past. And so the pandemic forced us to have virtual meetings. We offered a parent academy in a different format where we didn't have to have people in person. And so leveraging technology not only for learning, but to deepen connections with our families and our school community is something that we have found to be valuable, and I think that will continue on. And we also learned that there's tremendous power in our students, especially our secondary students, spending time off campus in other learning opportunities, particularly with earning dual credit. And there's some innovative ways that we believe that can happen, and we want to continue to build on that. And we know when our students have those opportunities, they're more successful when they graduate and leave us.
Chancellor, that's really interesting. So you're suggesting that some of the modes that you were forced into during the pandemic through the use of technology will be sustained in constructive ways in your communications. And secondly, it sounds like the pandemic also helped the system understand that we don't need to do all our educating in school, in person, in the ways that we always have. Some of our innovations we will also sustain. Is that fair?
You said it well, very fair. Captured it exactly the way I was thinking.
Thank you, Chancellor. Dr. Walker Davis, is that your observation also across the charter sector? I know Lewis is not just talking about DCPS, but do you have similar observations or anything different?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the expectation for where and how we learn has expanded, both on the part of the educators as well as our students. So I would absolutely echo Dr. Farabi's remarks. I would also double down on the fact that we have collaborated as education leaders, as government and non-governmental entities in ways that were certainly in response to the crisis that was in front of us. But I think we have learned how to do collaboration better. I think we've also set an expectation from our families and other members of the community that we will continue to collaborate and we will figure out ways to work better together, smarter. And so I would say that it has changed the way that we work, both at a very basic level, but also in terms of the systems and the structures that we're looking to co-create. So I think that is a major difference in terms of where we were prior to 2019 and where we are today. That standard has been raised, that expectation is there. And I know we jokingly talk about this, but there's rarely a time where there's a major issue that we're going to address in education that you, myself, Lewis, Christina, we're not on the phone with each other. We're not talking about it. We're not thinking about the early impacts of K-12 decisions, the impacts of K-12 decisions at higher ed. And so I would just underscore a new way of thinking about collaboration and a stronger commitment to it.
That's wonderful to hear, Dr. Walker Davis. Thank you for sharing that. Let me just ask specifically now, I think some folks in our audience might be interested to hear from you or Chancellor Farabee. When we talk about the extended ways of when and how we're learning as a can either of you just give an example of that so we can just understand that more deeply?
Yeah, so I think for us, one of the ways that we wanted to shift is capitalizing on learning time outside of the traditional school day. And so for us, that meant we had additional summer opportunities that included both a focus on academics and enrichment. We saw a lot of schools lean towards before and after school learning opportunities, along with leveraging Saturdays as well. And then the ability to utilize technology for learning outside the school day as well, whether that was distributing devices to students to learn at home, distributing hotspots for Wi-Fi so students can learn at home. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, the ability for students to take courses not only during the school day at our higher ed institution, but many of our students took those courses virtually as well. And so we believe that those are opportunities that we can continue going forward. That gives our students the ability to leverage learning outside of the traditional 6.5, 7-hour school day.
Thank you, Chancellor. I was also thinking about the Advanced Technical Center that was launched, where I know we've got high school students now traveling from their high schools to a central hub to learn cyber and health sciences career coursework. As potentially another good example of what you're describing. Let me shift gears now to talk to our higher ed colleagues. President Burwell, is this just a relief to get back to the way things were, or do you believe the fundamental nature of your university work has shifted in any way?
Well, Paul, before the pandemic, I believe that universities needed to change, and we needed to change in a number of ways in terms of how we think about things. And a lot of that has to do with us thinking through the question of the value proposition that we are providing for our students and family. And on the research side, today we're focused on one particular part, but that I believed before we came to the pandemic. And our strategy, it's called Changemakers for a Changing World, because even before the pandemic, believed we needed to think about some things differently. And one that our colleagues in K through 12 have hit on very much, which is the idea of partnership and collaboration. That's a very important part of how we need to think about meeting students' needs and meeting our families' needs, and doing that through partnership, because there are differing needs, figuring out what those needs are. And so I think that the pandemic accelerated some of that work and accelerated the need for those partnerships. And whether that was in things like how we think about partnering. We partnered on testing. American University partnered with Gallaudet in terms of getting a lab. That lab was used not just for higher ed, it was used for public school systems, it was used for others, but partnering in those ways on things like that. But I do think that the pandemic accelerated our thinking both about partnerships and how we can think about doing things more nimbly. We can be faster to respond to needs and change. And the other thing I would say is we all learned that we can do certain things we hadn't done before, perhaps better in ways. For instance, for some of our students, actually certain types of tutoring occur online. And so the student's ability to engage when they want to do that can help and work in that way. Another example is in the mental health space in terms of the use of technology and telehealth to help us create more access for our students too. So I think that the pandemic in higher ed accelerated changes that were both needed and starting to happen.
President Burwell, do you have any concerns about any of that? I recall the hand-wringing consternation early in the pandemic where people were declaring the death of the university as everyone was converting to online and worried that students would never return. Is there some unintended consequence of the pandemic on university life, or do you think universities are as robust and important as ever?
I think they're as robust, as important as ever, but I think part of one of the changes that we all need in higher ed is that we all need to think together about education. And we need to think not just about the needs that our institution is providing, but we need to think about it as a sector. And when I think about education, I actually think about it K through post-secondary. And it is the concept of lifelong learning, and we need to think about it together. And we need to think about what each of us are contributing to the needs of our community, if we're talking about here in DC, or more broadly the nation or the world, in terms of what are the needs and what do I provide to whom, when, and how. And so I believe that the issues at American University, when we went online, our chief online officer started the week before we had to put everybody online, and we already had 500 courses. It is a part, and it is about what different people need in terms of different things. And whether that's the consideration of what students need in smaller coursework, where having people together in conversation and dialogue face-to-face makes a real difference, to large lecture courses where perhaps maybe you can use more technology to do that. So I don't think it was the end. I think it was, as I said, the acceleration of us thinking about how can this tool help give our students what they need when they need it and how. But I think we also learned the importance of, for those of us who are residential institutions, the importance of that experience outside the classroom in terms of what students need to grow, not just to grow academically, but to grow in a number of other ways, whether that's working in an inclusive society and understanding those differences and how to work and think about that, as well as other things.
Thank you, President Burwell. President Mason, I am going to come to you. I had not intended to come to everyone, but I think this is an important part of the discussion. So let me ask you, are you digging out of the pandemic to get back to the way you were, or do you think there is some important change that is helpful or constructive?
So, it's interesting for us because we had just put into place our strategic plan, which was called the Equity Imperative. And the goal was to transform UDC into a model of urban student success, where all of our students would reach their highest levels of human potential. And then when the pandemic hit, we went back and reassessed that plan, and we didn't see anything that we needed to change. Because one of the advantages that we have is that, we're really a young institution. We're less than 50 years old, and we're sort of creating ourselves as we speak. So we're nimble, we're agile. And one of the keys to the strategic plan was recognizing the fact that as the pinnacle of public education in the district, we're the only public university here, as you know, we work with the same students that the other components of the public system serves. And so built into that strategic plan was not only focusing on priority workforce pipelines, building seamless multi-credential pathways with multiple on and off ramps, but also recognizing the fact that we had to develop stronger ties with our K-12 public education partners. And we've had a good, strong working relationship with Chancellor Farabee. We have the Dawn Initiative over in Ward 8, which is focusing specifically on students with greater challenges and communities with greater challenges. And, we have a high-tech center with a high-tech training component that has all of our faculty, ready, willing, and able to do online work. The challenge for us, as I said before, is that we have the plan, we have the vision, we're headed in the right direction to be the nation's, public university. The challenge is getting the students back on track so that we can put what we've learned to use in their lives and in the lives of the families that we serve.
Thank you, President Mason. One thing I feel like I heard in all of your responses was this idea, or the kernel of this idea, that the pandemic served in some fundamental ways to remind us of who we are serving and what their needs are.
Yes, sir. That and for us, it told us that we were better than we thought we were before the pandemic at a lot of things. But the other thing is this about the change. I don't know if our work has fundamentally changed, but the world has changed. People have different expectations of the workplace. Students have different expectations of what's available for them to learn and the tools that we have to use to teach them, right? And so I don't think we'll ever go back to what it was pre-pandemic, which is, in some ways a blessing because we've been forced to use, the tools that are available to enhance learning. But in other ways, having less students on campus, I think, is a challenge for some of our students. Online is a challenge for some of our students. And then from the economy, we feed this neighborhood here with having, a few thousand students on campus every day. And with less of those coming back to campus on a regular basis, the restaurants in the area are starting to wonder, when are we going to make them come back, which is a whole nother conversation.
Thanks, President Mason. The other point that I feel like I heard in several of your responses was this very important point about collaboration. So let's come to that as a topic now. And it seems clear from what you've already shared that the pandemic caused us to, or forced us to, collaborate in some new and very innovative ways across government, but also importantly for the discussion today here at the Chamber, with partners outside of government, outside of our institutions. So I want to ask you now, not what have we done that's been different, but what is the kind of collaboration that we think is the important next horizon for us? And in particular, given the setting that we're in, what's the important collaboration that we need to be doing with the business community? And if it's all right, Chancellor Farabee, I'll start with you. So what is the next horizon of collaboration generally? And then specifically, how does the business community fit into that new collaboration?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for that question. I think it's important for the audience to know that at DCPS, I know public charter schools as well, are collaborating with our higher ed institutions as well around our career and technical education programming, ensuring that our students have exposure to those experiences in high school, ensuring that those students that do want to go directly to work right out of high school, they have the credentials to do so. And so we are working and collaborating to create both rigorous, dynamic, and industry-aligned college and career readiness programs. And what that means for this group is that you can be engaged with obviously offering internships, apprenticeships, but we also need your support with understanding industry. And so industry leaders specifically can be engaged in DCPS. We have an industry council in a number of areas where we look to gain more insight on how we can better prepare students for the workforce. But career exploration is something that we're also interested in, ensuring that key businesses and industries open their doors or their expertise to our students. That can be serving as a guest speaker in a specific industry, or providing a job shadow experience for students, or just mentoring. But just ensuring that our students understand the workforce, and as we continue to expand our programs, understand how students can be best prepared. DCPS has 16 high schools with career and technical education programs, and they cover biotechnology, health sciences, engineering, hospitality, pharmacy. And so we want to be sure that we have the right programs, but also understand how we can continue to build those offerings out to prepare students for the workforce.
Thanks, Chancellor. Can you just share with us something you feel like you need from the business community?
Yeah, again, I think the opportunity to have industry experts speak with our students, offer those shadowing or internships or apprenticeships to our students, or just give us your perspective and expertise on how we should be preparing students. And if there's interest in serving in that capacity, we do have industry councils that advise all of our career and technical education programs in DCPS.
So you want DCPS to be more porous to business, and you feel like you're ready to receive and are looking for more partnership in terms of expertise and engagement.
Absolutely. And we know that your labor needs are changing and evolving, and we want to understand that so we can be best prepared to prepare our students accordingly.
Thank you, Chancellor. President Burwell, new opportunities for collaboration with business as you see them or not. I don't want to force the idea of collaboration where it's not appropriate, but I did see you nodding earlier when I asked the question. So I wonder if you have reflections on business partnerships.
So I think that the importance of our mission, their mission, the mission for the community of in terms of what the DC Chamber works on in terms of a vibrant community that the business sector plays a role in. And so I do think there are so many different places where this can do. I would focus on one particular area and looking at it from both sides. And one is understanding what the workforce needs are. We know that DC, there's growth in terms of the business community and thinking about what the needs are of that community. And the Greater Washington Partnership has been a part of that articulation of what types of skills that are needed. A group of businesses from Richmond to Baltimore, a group of universities spanning that have come together to understand and talk about in specific terms what are the needs so that our curriculum meets those needs and we're giving credentials that meet the needs. And so meeting the needs in that way, but the business community also being a part of experiential learning for our students, as part of that entire education and the whole student, the importance of experiential learning, which is a very important part of what the business community does. And then partnering in other ways that are different. So we partner with Trinity, we partner with Martha's Table and several other organizations here in DC and have been a part of JP Morgan's Advancing Cities grant. And this work is focused on economic development, the particular work that we're doing in partnership, the kinds of things I think we need to do more in the future. It's a partnership for Hispanic and Black women who want to work in early childhood education. We're providing the education together with Trinity. We will provide what the district wants and requires for people who are doing early education. We get support from organizations and NGOs like Martha's Table, where these women can go and do their experiential learning and also have childcare for their children. So when we start to think about these partnerships and thinking about meeting different needs, what can each of us bring to the table?
That's such a wonderful example. President Burwell, do you have something else up your sleeve that's a similar kind of consortium approach where you're partnering with job placements, employers, and other education providers, or are you focused on making that as good as it can get?
We focus on making that as good as it can get. We focus on continuing the work with the Greater Washington Partnership. We are working on partnerships directly with companies that come to us and tell us that they have certain academic needs or needs for their workforce, and we work directly with them. And I will say the traditional part of this that everybody knows about, I was just at, in our Bender Arena, I was just at a career day yesterday in terms of walking around with the students where we bring employers directly to the campus and as a part of that. So there are the traditional things that we need to do more and better, but there are these new things that Part of it is being nimble and being ready to receive. I think we hear, and I'm sure President Mason hears too, that higher education can sometimes be difficult. And whether that's Chancellor Furby and Dr. Walker Davis trying to work with us, or businesses trying to work with us. And so to your point about what's new and what's going to be new, Paul, I think it is this idea that we come to the table wanting to understand what are your needs, being able to articulate our needs so that we can move these partnerships forward more quickly.
Thank you. President Mason, your name was called.
It
Do you
was.
believe that there are partnerships that you want to engage in new ways with business?
There are, and we do a lot of the standard things that President Burwell mentioned. And our partnership development is a work in progress because UDC is a work in progress. But we're doing something I think that is a little different. Because we spent a lot of time asking ourselves, why is there such a talent shortage in the country that is so wealthy and should be able to produce the talent that employers need? And that led us to our Developing America's Workforce Nucleus initiative in Ward 8 at Anacostia High School, which has a national advisory committee, and some of the folks I'm sure on this that are in the audience here are on that advisory committee, and we have PEPCO working with us in Washington Gas and about 11 federal agencies, right? But it's the theory behind it that I think is gonna make the point. And the thinking is that America really is a rigged competition, and you have to understand how that simple reality impacts the ability to produce talent. And so when we look at the talent pipeline and the loss of talent as it works its way through that pipeline, a lot of it is the result of what has to happen when you rig a competition, right? You have to suppress talent that you don't want to compete. And so we've put that, on the table directly, and that's the way we explain it to employers. And, some get it, some don't, some buy it, some don't. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at all of the baby boomers that are retiring, the current talent shortage that our employers are facing, and the fact that our talent production pipeline, our education system, really is not putting out the talent at all of the levels that it should be, then I think you really do have to re-examine the model, and that's the proof of concept we're trying to work through in Ward 8 through our Developing America's Workforce Nucleus.
Well, President Mason, it sounds like part of what you are problematizing for us is the through line between K-12 and higher ed. And I think many believe that the gap is more like a cliff. We certainly see many students falling off and disappearing in DC at that moment of transition. Chancellor Furby mentioned earlier his DC Persists program, which tries to coach students out of K-12 into higher ed. So that's K-12 leaning up. You've
Right.
described a model where, as a higher ed institution, you're leaning back down, shall we say, into that. So let me just pose the more general question to all of you now.
Paul, can
What
I
is-
just want one thing before you go there, just for clarity?
Please.
We see it from the community to the employer. I mean, that's the pipeline, right? And they all have to connect in order to produce the kind of talent that we need, okay? Just for clarity, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, no, I appreciate that. And my question was going to be, how should we be doing that? What are the next moves that we should all be making in order to make the connection between K-12 and higher ed stronger, that makes the connection between the education system and workforce stronger in some of the ways that we've already been talking about? But I'd love any general reflections on next moves we're all considering or should be considering to strengthen those connections.
Well, DCPS currently provides to middle school students and high school students a college and career guide that is personalized to them, that reflects their interests and also the requirements for graduation and the careers that they're interested in. We are considering ways in which that document comes alive with experiences that students may have in connection with our higher ed institutions and employers in the city. So we don't have the idea fully developed, but one aspect of that is to begin to create more face opportunities, more in-person opportunities for students as early as our middle grades on our college campuses here in the city. To begin to connect with those institutions early on and to get a feel for what's offered there even before they get into their high school years. We think that will provide a new horizon of thinking for our younger learners and begin to develop a stronger strategy for families as students enter in high school. We think that there's ways in which we can also include employers in that exploration process. So students understand every facet of potential employment here in the region and can begin to get excited and plan accordingly throughout their high school experience. So I think there are ways in which the guide that we have for our students can be realized in a different way and again come alive for students that I think can create revolutionary excitement for our students.
It's really interesting, Chancellor. It sounds like starting at a younger age, creating connections, but also certain ways of thinking and habits of mind amongst those younger students could be really helpful. Dr. Walker-Davis, let me ask you from your systems level perspective about these points of connection and intersections, work that we should be doing.
Yeah, I would just double down on early career exploration, college exploration for students. And I will name that might be a little trickier to do with several different charter schools than perhaps a centralized DCPS. And so I reflect on what does that then mean we need to do as city government to make those transitions easier, central access points, both for the students and for the business employers. And how do we lean in and leverage your office, the Deputy Mayor's office, our workforce investment supports, our universities, et cetera. I think that there's an opportunity to have a more robust citywide dual enrollment approach, not just at the college level, but also career exploration. And I think we have all of the pieces. It's more of these kind of collective conversations and thinking about where there are gaps, where tweaks might be necessary, and how each of us individually do our work to increase the access. And I'm just reminded of, for our larger LEAs, they have those connections and supports with higher ed institutions, with some business communities. I want to applaud and encourage continued adopt a school efforts on the part of our business community. But I also think that there are ways for us to think about what government can do to make it easier for the smaller LEAs, the single site middle schools that might not be as large, so that those students are able to fully access opportunities as well. I don't believe, thankfully, that we're starting from scratch. I think it's more of us reflecting on how we leverage some of the capacity that we already have to do more.
Thank you. I am curious about what government can do, but I'm not going to pause there because I think that will take up the rest of our time. I'm going to come to you, President Burwell, with the same question, but before I do, I want to share with the audience that we are reserving time at the end of the session for audience Q&A. And I believe you can submit your questions, which I will then be able to see. So if you've got them, you should please provide them to our moderator. And we will take them and look forward to engaging in that kind of discussion. But before we go there, President Burwell, let me just ask for your reflections on this question.
I would just, I don't want to repeat, but I think that Chancellor Fairby and Dr. Walker-Davis, the idea of dual enrollment and how we do that is quite important, a piece that has been mentioned by both. That's something we continue to want to work to do as a university, and we believe it does lead to, we have seen it, we've started the program, we see those students that are dual enrolled, many of them do come. They come and they sustain. And it's related to the other point that Chancellor Fairby raised. He was talking about moving programs that we are already doing in terms of students who are juniors and seniors having experiences on our college campuses so that they are learning, understanding. It does two things. It both increases the likelihood that they will come in the first place, but it also works on these issues of sustaining when these students come. And so these are programs that we work with, both with the public system and the charter system. And I would just say, continuing to make sure that we can do more and better and extend it, as both have said, in terms of thinking through those younger students as well.
Thank you, President Burwell. Let's turn to a couple of questions from the audience now. There has been lots of talk about employees' new relationship with work. And I want to know what each of you think about this and what we can be doing to best prepare young people for this new relationship with work. So I guess I should ask whether you believe the premise in the first instance. But so do you believe there is a new relationship with work that young people have as they come into the workforce? And if so, what do we need to be doing differently to help prepare them?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think I've read most recently that 50% of the workers in the region work remotely, and I think that is true. I think it was true for some time, and I think the remote work environment is different in many ways than the traditional work environment. So I think the ability to be nimble and agile with the various types of work environments that our students will go into, and you know, the etiquette, the professionalism, and also the skills needed to be successful and thrive in those environments. We want to replicate those as much as possible, and ensuring that our students are prepared to work from home if they need to work remotely if they need to leverage technology in a way that allows them to be successful in those environments. And the way that we collaborate now is different, and the way we use technology to collaborate is different. So I think there's some insight to be gained about how students will need to navigate the new work environment.
Paul, I just wanted to actually give ourselves in the education space some credit in that we have actually been training our students to navigate these multiple modalities of learning right now. We did it through the pandemic. We're doing it now that folks have returned primarily in person. And to connect to what Dr. Farabee said earlier, we're using technology to extend learning. We're using technology to think differently about what the classroom looks like. And so in some ways, I think our students have had quite some time preparing themselves to navigate these situations in a way that perhaps they might be more ready than we anticipate for a workforce that is less dependent on people being physically located in a brick and mortar space. And so I think that there are some practices that we as educators had to put in place and have our students learn so that we ensured that there was not only their own personal safety, but that quite frankly, they were on task. And so I think that we can give ourselves some credit in that we've been building some systems and some ways of being and teaching that to our young folks that perhaps they're more ready than we think.
Thank you, Dr. Walker Davis. Here's a question on citizenship. The pandemic has put greater pressure on our communities and our democracy than we have seen in quite some time. It is the role of education institutions to help shore up our democracy and our community. What are the things that we should be doing collectively in order to shore up our democracy and our community? President Mason, can I turn to you?
Sure. I think it's always been the role of education to shore up and secure our democracy. You know, in the enabling legislation of the District of Columbia, when they created UDC, they referred back to George Washington and how he said that the key to the success of the democracy they were starting back in 1790 was to create not only a military academy, but also a public university in the district. And I think that's because he recognized that, you know, that there's sort of the America that we live, but there's the idea that we believe in. And it's only through education that we can help people understand and fight for that idea. And of course, the big challenge we have today is that we have people that have not learned about democracy and have not learned about you know, what it means and what the potential of it is. And so I would say, yes, we have a role, despite the push to, you know, sanitize history and take books out of the libraries. I think that we need to make sure that the truth is always on the table and people know the reality of not only who we are, but what we can be. And only universities and institutions of learning can do that.
Yeah, and just, I know you didn't call on me, Paul, but I just want to double click this point that that President Mason made about transparency. You know, DCPS in the pandemic started a new thread of our curriculum, and it's entitled Living Through History. And we thought it was so important to create space for students to write about, debate, and analyze this moment that we're in as we're challenged with, you know, intensified lines of political division and what role that plays in their ability to be a responsible citizen, but also how to create civility in this moment when there is discourse, and to create more awareness around what their roles and responsibilities are as a citizen. And for us, a lot of that has centered around the conversation, just what responsibilities you have with voting and your rights for voting, and how government is structured and how representation is realized in the United States. And so our students, you know, with great excitement, have actually been more interested in this space than ever before. And I think it's important that we continue to elevate this moment that we're in so they can continue to be great learners of what's happening around them right now.
Well put, Louis.
President Burwell?
I would just say, you know, it is an incredibly important, as President Mason said, responsibility of higher ed to contribute to the democracy. And I believe we do it in three ways. One, we do it through the knowledge creation, the scholarship and research that helps us understand the facts and analysis of what is happening and what has happened. The second way we do it is in the students that we're educating, who are the leaders of tomorrow, who are going to be the citizens of tomorrow, and making sure that we are doing things like helping them with what we were just talking about, which is civil discourse and understanding complex problems, learning to listen, hear, analyze, and act in terms of how we think about that piece. And the third piece is with our engagement with the community. And, you know, here at American University, our School of Public Affairs has a specific program in working with folks on the Hill and staff on the Hill on how to negotiate through differences so that legislation can get done. So I think there are several important ways that we as universities need to engage and be a part of the solution space of making sure we have a healthy democracy to go forward.
Thank you, President Burwell. I'm now going to transition back to my own body of questions with a final one in the last 2 minutes. Lightning round. 10 years from now, we are convened again together at the Chamber's annual panel on the state of the district education and workforce systems. 10 years from now, what do you think you will be most proud of, or you should be most proud of? Or I should say perhaps the people that come after us. What will be the thing we're most proud of having accomplished 10 years from now? Lightning round, 30 seconds each, please. We'll start with you, Chancellor Farabee.
DCPS disrupted the high school experience as we know it, where we have elevated the priorities we set today around career and technical education and learning outside of the walls of the traditional school day.
Dr. Walker Davis.
That our young people have access to career and college opportunities as early as middle school and have multiple robust opportunities to achieve their highest potential on any one of those paths.
President Burwell.
Education, all of us, K through 12, higher ed, we think about lifelong learning and meeting the needs of the students where they are, and we don't just think about it, we actually provide it as a group together.
President Mason.
That the University of the District of Columbia will be the nation's public university, and all that implies.
Well, thank you all. I can share that you are an inspiring group of leaders, and I think we as a city are lucky to have each of you in the roles that you are in. I want to thank you very much for contributing to today's robust and interesting and challenging conversation. So thank you all, and I will turn it back over to Angela.